Welcome to Ridge Church Online as we gather for one last message together for the year. We as a church have decided through the years to take 2 Sundays off, and the last Sunday of December is one of those. It's just one of our ways of saying thanks to all the incredible volunteers and the staff that give so much of themselves, so much of their time, so much of their energy to make our environments happen and our church what it is. And so we hope that you have some great time with family. But we wanted to take just a moment to look back before we look forward to 2025. There was one series that we did this year called The Way of Jesus, and I wrapped up this series with a message called The Way of the Well. This message, probably more than any other, captures the heart and the vision and the passion that we have as a church, and it will be very important and have maybe pronounced significance as we enter into 2025. So we wanted to end the year by throwing back to that message, reminding ourselves why we do the things we do and what we are passionate about as a group of people. So whether you're brand new to our church or you've been here for a long time, I think this will be encouraging for you. And we're so glad that we get to gather in this way. 2 quick things before we get to the message. One, I just want to say many of you have been generous to our church this year. We're so grateful. It enables and empowers our mission in some really incredible ways. And then for those of you that have yet to give, we would love to invite you to come along with us in the journey. How we close out this year will determine our missional capacity for the days ahead and really for the entire next year. And so we got a few days left to lean in, to be generous, and we would invite you to do that with us. What we wanted to do just before we get to the message is just remind you. Sometimes you need the reminders. There are 1,000 reasons why what you do matters, why what we do together matters. These are just a few reminders of the significance of our mission. And then after that, I hope you enjoy the message for the day. It's good to see you guys. Again, one of the many Chris's around here. And if you're new and I have not had an opportunity to meet you at some point, I would love to do that. And so for those of you that have been around for a long time, welcome back. I think you picked a great day to be here. So let me start with this. How many of you guys remember these far-fetched, never could possibly happen, end of the world takes movies where artificial intelligence ends up becoming self-aware, and they're like see humanity as a threat, which that part's plausible, right? And then they take over the world. You guys, you remember those? Like really, circa 80s, 90s, they started to become mainstream. So, what's the first one that comes to your mind? Terminator. I heard iRobot. So Terminator, I thought. I don't know if that one spans generations, but I actually think it's the most popular. I tested it on my 13-year-old daughter. I said, "Hey, Brinley, do you know what Terminator is?" And she went, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I said, well, what is it?" She said, "Well, it's like a dystopian end times movie." This is quote, dystopian end times movie where an artificial intelligence takes over. I'm like, "Okay, you know what it is. All right." I've been to school before and again. So I heard iRobot. What were some of the others? Blade Runner. I heard. You guys are all talking at the same time. I love it. It's like if I'd asked a question about Jesus, it'd been crickets. It's like, hey, let's talk about Jonah. I don't know where that's. Say it again. All right, so that's the OG. That's the OG. War Games is the original. Some of you are not old enough to appreciate that. It was an analog world. It could never happen. But anyway, so let me tell you a couple of statistics on AI that will be intriguing to you. So I found this week. AI is expected to create 33 million new jobs by 2030. Now, that sounds like that's forever away. That's 6 years away, just in case you were wondering. Listen to this. This is crazy. By 2030, AI will contribute $15 million to the global economy. Did I say million? Billion. I'm sorry, trillion. $15 trillion to the global economy. Now, by 2030, 30% of the work hours, this one maybe scares a little bit, 30% of the work hours across the U.S. will be AI automated, artificial intelligence. So let me say this again. You remember when there was these crazy, far-fetched ideas that AI could take over the world, and we're like, that could never happen. Those were the good days, weren't they? We live in a crazy, fast-paced world. It's developing, it's changing in front of our eyes. There are things that we would have never dreamed of that are actually the reality in which we are living. Now, I don't have to convince you of this, perhaps a couple reminders as we get started today. If I had told you 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that the two largest taxi services in the world, Uber and Lyft, wouldn't own a car, we wouldn't have a category for that. If I had told you that we would have self-driving cars, aside from Knight Rider, we wouldn't have had a category for that either. I hear you children of the 80s and 90s laughing. I heard that. If I had told you, hey, there's going to be this company called Amazon, and they're going to pretty much be able to deliver anything on the planet to you within a day, we'd be like, that's not possible because I just wrote a letter to my pen pal, and it's going to take them 3 weeks to get the letter, right? Then and now. That's the truth. Like, we don't have a cat. My wife and I literally ordered something maybe last week off Amazon. Let me just rephrase that. Every day off of Amazon. And we got home and the package beat us home. It was on the doorstep waiting for us. Like if someone had told you years ago that we have the technology to do that, it just wouldn't even seem possible. We made up currency. We did that. Bitcoin, that's fun. People tell me it's real. I don't have any in my pocket. I don't know, but I've been told. We just made it up. I didn't know you could do that. When's the last time that you walked down a grocery aisle to actually get your pickup order, not just the stuff that you forgot when they delivered it to your house or delivered it to your car while you were sitting in the Target parking lot? Like, I feel a little guilty. I told my wife, we were sitting at Target the other day, this 15-year-old girl is putting all of these groceries in the back of my car, and I feel a little guilty, but I just let it happen, right? You did too. Like, the world is changing so fast. Overalls are back. I didn't see that coming.
Like they went away. They're like, I believe this is a dad joke and a preacher joke. Overalls have resurrection life, right? They went away, they came back, then they went away, then they came back again. And they really look the same every single time. I don't understand it. So I didn't know that was going to happen. I remember, some of you have heard me tell this story when my older girls were still teenagers. I remember this season, I don't know, I can't keep up. I don't know if this is still happening. But these really high-waisted jeans came back in for like a minute, I think. And my daughter came downstairs wearing these, and I did a double take because in that moment, here's what happened in my life. At that moment, my teenage daughter and my almost 80-year-old dad had the exact same waistline. That's what happened. I'm like, all right, I don't know. It's like opposite day, and I don't know what's happening to my life and to my world. Things are changing. We live in a rapidly changing world. Now, some of you haven't heard anything I said because you're like, he's got a visual illustration. All right, how many of you know what this is? This is artificial intelligence. It's a parking meter. All right, so I grew up in Athens, Georgia. Go Dogs. I didn't get anything from that. On the front row, Roll Tide, they're always available for me. Hecklers. All right, so in Athens, Georgia, some of you heard me share this before. This one actually takes dimes. It takes a nickel, a dime, and a penny, all right? It's old school. So when I was growing up, all you needed was a pocket full of pennies, downtown Athens, and you could enjoy the entire day. This is it. You just put a couple pennies in, you enjoy the entire day. You could experience everything that Athens had to offer, and we did many times. Fast forward, I remember going to Atlanta. I was on a business trip, and while we were in Atlanta, we ended up with a parking meter. I start scrounging around in the car for pennies. Then I realized this thing doesn't take any change. It doesn't take pennies. It doesn't take nickels or quarters. It doesn't take any change. So my friend comes to the rescue, saves me, puts a credit card in. Then fast forward, they don't even take credit cards anymore. They take Apple Pay. Then as recent as 6 weeks ago, the evolution of this story, I was in Athens, Georgia again. I was visiting my dad. We were going to get coffee in downtown Athens. And while I was there, we pulled in, and the parking meter not only did it not take pennies, nickels, quarters, or any kind of change, it didn't take a credit card. It did not take smartphones. It didn't take Apple Pay. You know why? Because there was no parking meter. There was just a QR code that said, scan this, download the app, and then it said, and there's a camera behind you taking a picture. Basically, we're going to send you a ticket. And I'm like, what is happening right now? So I'm sitting in the car with my dad. He's like, we're getting coffee. I'm like, I'm trying, Dad. Like, I'm trying to download this app, and then I have no service. And he said, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm trying to download the app. He said, I don't want an appetizer. I'm like, Dad, it's not that kind of app. And like, I'm working on it finally. Like 10 minutes later, I'm like, I just got to go. I got to go for it because if I keep saying appetizer, I'm putting it in my dad's head and I'm going to have to come out of this coffee shop with some skillet queso or we're going to have a problem, right? So I make a run for it and I go and I just think I'm going to get a ticket later. You guys know this. We live in a rapidly changing world. Every single day, this is your reality, but because we live in it, we don't think about it. And here's the reason that I'm saying this. If we show up, I keep calling this, and I have been for years, calling this a cultural and generational intersection. And if we show up to this cultural and generational intersection as the church or as individuals with a pocket full of pennies, here's what's true. Two things. Someone will be influencing the next generation. Someone will be influencing current culture, but that someone will not be us. Because we live in a changing world. To think that the church, this thing that was meant to span generations, has spanned generations, but to think that the church can live in this kind of vortex of a rapidly changing world and employ the exact same methods that we had 10, 20, 30, and 40 years ago and still have effectiveness in our mission, quite frankly, is nuts. It just doesn't make any sense, yet that's what we do. Double down on the same thing that we've done in the same way that we've done it. I don't want you to miss this. What if we have a church system or a church model or a church method? We've been talking in this series about the fact that we all have a way of doing life. Your family has a way of doing life. Churches have a way of doing life. What if we have a culture? What if we have a way of doing things that is perfectly designed for a culture that no longer exists? And what if we just keep doubling down, saying that's what we're going to do? We're going to push further. Again, if we show up to this moment in culture with a pocket full of pennies, someone will influence this generation, but it won't BS. So as we wrap up this series, The Way of Jesus, been a challenging series, been a good series, but I want to invite us in this last installment just to take our cue from Jesus, from his example, really in a very specific thing from a very specific story. But I want to warn you, hearing this will not bother you at all today. Like what I'm going to talk about, like you'll kind of amen in your head. If you're an amen person, you'll agree, you'll nod, you'll understand it. This won't bother you to hear it. But doing what Jesus models, if we actually say, hey, I'm not just going to hear that and applaud that and think that's fun, but actually doing this will make some of us, many of us, perhaps all of us, extremely uncomfortable. But I'm just telling you, the passage of Scripture we're going to look at today, this story that we're going to look at today has profoundly shaped my life. Is shaping my life and has shaped my life, and it has made a huge impact in the way that we think about church, the way that we think about our community, and so I hope that it's going to be the same for you today. So this story comes from a guy by the name of John. For those of you that know John, John's self-proclaimed. I love this. If you read the story, John says, hey, I was Jesus' favorite. Like, you know, you tell your parents that, like, I'm the favorite child. Like, your parents told all of you that you were the favorite, right? He says, I'm Jesus' favorite. Self-proclaimed, he's like, I'm his favorite one, but he was one of the inner circle of Jesus, traveled with Jesus, saw like literally stood at the crucifixion with Jesus' mother, at the end of days taking care of Jesus' mother. He was very, very close to Jesus. And so what we're looking at here, just like previous installments of the series, you're hearing it from an insider, someone who this wasn't just theory for them, they literally experienced this. So we're going to look at John chapter 4. Jesus is traveling from a place called Judea to a place called Galilee, and we find this interaction between Jesus and this Samaritan woman at a well that we know of that's called Jacob's well. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to overview this, and I want to draw your attention to some really high-level takeaways, but I want to say this. Please go back and read this for yourself. John chapter 4 is so rich, and we're not going to hit every single detail of it, but it literally is one of those stories in the Scripture that I believe you can read over and over and over again, and something new come alive every single time. So we're going to start off, John chapter 4, verse 4. This is how the story starts. Again, Jesus is traveling from Judea to Samaria, it says, or Judea to Galilee. It says this, now he had to go through Samaria. Seems like a skip over it verse, right? Seems like a verse is just getting to the next verse, but it's actually one of the pivot points of the entire passage. When it says, now Jesus, had to go through Samaria, the truth is Jesus didn't actually have to go through Samaria, at least not geographically and not even culturally. It wasn't the normal rhythm that anyone would have taken during that day. And let me explain it this way. Josephus, a Jewish historian, talks about this very idea. And he says that the pathway that Jesus took that day was an uncommon pathway. I have a map I want to show you. So this is what Josephus says. So if you can look at the red dotted line, this is the pathway that any Jewish person would have taken if they were going from Judea to Galilee. But especially any Jewish religious leader, which Jesus was. He was a rabbi. So this is the route, the red dotted line. Yet the green is the route that Jesus took. The normal, the common route was the red route, which you can see, it literally takes the wide turn around Samaria. Jesus is going to take the direct path straight through, which begs the question, why would the normal route of the day for the religious leaders, for all Jewish people, but especially the religious leaders of the day, to take the wide turn around Samaria? And the answer is simple. We are not the first generation to have racism. It's existed in every generation in human history. It's never been okay. It will never be okay. But this was a simple issue of racism and a complex issue of racism. See, the Jewish people, they believed that the Samaritans were half-breeds. They had a mixed up religion. They had a mixed up way of doing things, a mixed up way of thinking about life, afterlife, God, all of the things. And so here's what we have. Two things happening. This is so important. On one hand, you've got the religious leaders of the day that are taking the wide turn to route around who they are against. Then you got Jesus. He's always turning things upside down. Jesus takes the direct path in light of who he's for. He takes what I have come to call it the uncommon path in light of who he's for. And this is so fascinating. As he takes this uncommon path, he finds in this journey at this well a Samaritan woman who is an outcast, not only from the Jews and Samaritans don't get along, we know that, but she is an outcast among her own people. And if you read the details of the story, you will see why. Even the time of day that she was drawing water is an indicator that she was trying to avoid people. But this is a woman who had no place to go, no people to call her own. Have you ever felt like that in a season of your life? Perhaps you feel like that now, where you go, I don't know who are my people. Like, I don't know. If I'm in crisis, if I'm in tragedy, I don't know who the people are that I can trust with the deepest, darkest, most difficult seasons of my life. This is a woman who has no place to go, no people to call her own. There's no one that's adding value or giving hope in her life. Her self-worth is shot. She does not have an idea of who she really is, her identity, and Jesus encounters this woman that doesn't belong anywhere. And I love this little phrase. John says, Jesus had to go to Samaria. But he didn't. But he did. He didn't have to go because of geography. He didn't have to go because it was the routine of the day. But he had to go because this is what Jesus does. He encounters the lost and the least. He will reroute his path in light of who he's for every time. And this isn't just what Jesus did. This is what he does. Present tense. This is what he does. And when I say the lost, I don't mean that to be negative. I don't mean that to be demeaning to someone. We're just talking about people that are spiritually lost, people that don't know that Jesus has already found them. They haven't found that out yet. And we want them to discover that. Jesus always moves in the direction of those who are lost and the least, those that don't have a voice for themselves. Those that don't have power to take care of themselves, those that are helpless. Jesus always moves in the direction of those individuals. Which leads us to the first big thought from this passage. In light of who we're for, sometimes you have to take the uncommon path. And let me just, newsflash, I'm not just talking about the church. I'm talking about us, like individuals. And let me just tell you something about the uncommon path. You probably could just call it the uncomfortable path. Like sometimes this requires us to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations. I'm going to say this over and over and over again because this is an election year. Sometimes you're going to have to make yourself uncomfortable to love the person who's nothing like you, who voted nothing like you, who doesn't see the world like you. I'm not saying you have to agree with them, but you do have to love them because they are someone for whom Jesus died every time. Including you, including me. You can disagree with them, but you can't not love them. And sometimes the uncommon path is the uncomfortable path. Sometimes the uncommon path means that we don't pick up the religious mantra of our day, the religious systems of our day. Jesus was going against the religious systems. These guys were the spiritual pace setters. They were the ones that were giving the example. Everyone would follow in path to what they did, and Jesus carves a new path. He did not follow the religious mantra or the religious systems of his day, but he takes the uncommon path in light of who he's for. And if I'm honest, this sounds good, but it sounds overwhelming because, like, at the end of the day, isn't it true? Like, because we're for everybody, right? I mean, like, technically, the gospel, the good news of Jesus, is for everybody, right? So this feels broad. This feels ethereal. And while it's true that we're for everyone, this isn't particularly helpful, is it? Because here's what happens. When you're just for everyone, sometimes it gets diluted. You get overwhelmed and you end up not being for anyone. Because you're like, I'm supposed to be for everyone, but I don't know how to be. Like, we just get overwhelmed. And so several years ago, our leadership team, we sat down and we just said, hey, how do we, just for us as a church, how do we narrow the focus on this? Like, how do we get really specific? And this is not like I'm saying all churches and all places and all times should do this, but we just said for us, in this season of time, in this geographic region, and with what God has given us, we've got to dial it in. And we just said, hey, there are 4 groups, as we got laser focused, there are 4 groups that we are for. There are 4 groups that we're going to do everything in our power that when it comes to these 4, and there may be others, but specifically when it comes to these 4, we're going to do whatever we have to do to take the uncommon route to get to them. And the language has shifted and been molded over the years, but for the last pretty much 10 years, we've been laser focused on these 4. The first one is this. We say we're for lost sons and daughters. Again, we don't mean that to be negative, because people that are lost, they don't know they're lost. That's the nature of being lost. When I wasn't in a relationship with Jesus, I didn't know that's the nature of it. But we say this all the time. We want people in this space, and I hope this is true of your life, not just true of our church, but whatever happens in your home is what's going to happen with all of us. But we want to create spaces and places and realities and relationships where with us, people can belong before they believe. And let me just be clear, I say this every time. This is not a bait and switch. If you're here, you're not a Christian, you know someone that's not, you invite them here, we want them to believe. I want you to believe because I think it's the best thing for your life. I think it's the best thing for my life. I want my children to believe, everybody that I care about. But here's what we're saying. We don't think belief should be a prerequisite for belonging because it wasn't with Jesus. We say all the time, and this is not original to me, we say that people who were nothing like Jesus liked Jesus. And Jesus liked them. Look at who he hung out with. He hung out with people that didn't believe in him all the time. Usually by the end, they believed in him. Why? Because he gave them a place to belong. We say we're for the marginalized. Listen, guys, we're for the marginalized and those who are for them. Organizations, individuals. We want to stand in the gap. We want to get behind them, be the wind in their sails. We have to be the voice for the voiceless. We have to lend our power, the things of authority that we've been given, the affluence that we've been given. If that's your reality, we have to lend that to others. We say it this way. We say we want to do for one. You'll see it plastered all over our walls. Like we want to do for one what we wish we could do for all. We can't do everything for everyone. Same way, sometimes that immobilizes us. You're like, it's overwhelming. But we can do something for someone. We can't pick up every Title I school in the city, but we can pick up one. Maybe eventually we can pick up multiple. What if every church picked up one? We're going to do for one what we wish we could do for all. We have a few organizations that are stepping into those spaces, and we say, hey, we're going to put wind in their sails as they speak into the lives of the marginalized. We say we're for the community. This is big. It sounds like something a church should say, but this is really a big passion for us. When I say the community, I mean all of it. Like business leaders, marketplace leaders, families, we're for the community. We say it this way, we want to be the best church for the city. One time I had worship leader was relatively new to the stage, and he said, hey, we want to be he said, we're the best church in the city. And I remember just kind of cringing. I'm like, number one, we're not. Like, we're not. There's some really great churches in the city. And number two, I don't even want to be. That's not even my goal. That's not our goal. I don't think that was the goal of Jesus. But here's the reality. Being the best church for the city, that's the aroma of Jesus. Here's what we're saying. We think when we're blessed, we should raise the water level for everybody. That all the ships, all of them should rise when we're blessed. Our friend Jeff Henderson done some great work in this space, and he has this quote. He says, and we've adopted this question. He says, how is your church making the local community a better place to live? That's a great question. Like, this community should be a better place to live just because all of us are here. Because we're aiming at stuff, making a difference collectively together. The fourth group that we're for is we say we're for the next generation. Listen, we want to unapologetically, we want to partner with families. It's hard. What you're doing is hard. For those of you who have children, have grandchildren in this generation, we want to partner with you. We want to speak into the next generation. One of the things that we say is this, and we mean this, we want to hand the church off one day to the next generation in better shape with more influence. And to do that, let me just tell you what's not going to happen. You're not going to show up to the party with a pocket of pennies because we're in a rapidly changing culture. We don't want what we're doing to end with us. It can't, shouldn't. So I want to point out one more thing in this story. Again, this is high level. I hope you go back and spend some time in John chapter 4 or read it for yourself. But this is so simple, but often overlooked. And when I saw it, again, this revolutionized the way I think about my life, the way we think about church. Jesus could have preached 1,000 great sermons. And his sermons are great. They are. Read Matthew 5, 6, and 7, Sermon on the Mount. It's remarkable, life-changing, world-changing, flip things upside down kind of preaching. He could have preached 1,000 great sermons, and none of them would have changed this woman's life. And it's not because they weren't good. You know why? Because she wouldn't have been there. Wherever he preached them, synagogue, temple, whatever the religious institution of the day was, because that wasn't her people. That wasn't where she went. Listen, people who don't like the temple, people who don't like the church, newsflash, they don't go there. But this is so beautiful. On that particular day, this woman's life is changed forever because Jesus didn't invite her to the temple. Instead, he met her at the well. The well was her natural rhythm of life. Again, we know from the narrative, if you read it, there were some things that she had some shame. The time of day she was there meant she was avoiding people. But this was a routine for her. It's what she did every single day of her life. Go and draw water. And Jesus sovereignly meets her in that place, in the natural rhythm of her life. And I'm just telling you, as he entered her story, I assure you it was complicated. There was sexism involved. There was racism involved. There was shame. She was an adulteress. This thing was messy, but Jesus looked her in the eyes, had conversations with her, brought value and significance and meaning to her life. I believe for the first time as you read this story, she lit up and understood who she is as a daughter of God. The lights come on, but it started because he got out of his rhythm and got into her rhythm and looked her in the eyes and added value to this individual. He reminded her of her value. He reminded her of her worth. And I love this as a result. A woman who would have never darkened the doors of a religious establishment of the day, especially his. As a result of this, her life has changed forever. And if you read the rest of the story, she can't stop talking about it. She tells her neighbors, she tells her friends, you got to come meet this man who told me everything that's ever happened in my life. You got to experience this. And countless people ended up encountering Jesus as a result of the fact that she had encountered Jesus. This thing that happened when she met Jesus, her true identity was unlocked. And it led to her, this unleashing of her passion with the people around her. When I saw this was there all along. I don't know how many times I've read this passage over and over again, but when I saw this was revolutionary for me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. We couldn't stop talking about it. Our leaders started to talk about this, and we started to dream, and we just said, hey, what if the church could somehow become a modern-day Jacob's Well, connecting with people in the natural rhythms of their life? What if not just the church, but the individuals in the church, what if this could become our mantra, our marching orders, that we connect with people in the natural rhythms of their life, to look at them at eye level and to bring dignity, to bring hope, to bring grace, to remind people of their true identity as sons and daughters of the living God? What if the church could become a modern-day Jacob's Well and connect with people? Hey, here's the key. That might never attend church because people don't like church, don't go to church. And listen, that group is growing. Listen to this. Some of you heard me read this quote maybe a few weeks ago. But there was this thing that started off as research, ended up in a book. It's called The Great De-Churching of America by Jim Davis and Michael Graham. This one quote, staggering. We're currently living, and this is fresh, hot off the press, this is brand new. We're currently living in the largest and fastest religious shift in U.S. history. Some 40 million adult Americans who used to go to church at least once per month now attend less than once per year. This shift is larger than the number of conversions during the First Great Awakening, the Second Great Awakening, and the totality of the Billy Graham crusades. So here's the thing. If we're going to reach people we're not currently reaching and love people that right now we don't even have the opportunity to love with a life-changing message that they will never hear, we have to get in their world. We have to take an uncommon path. Or we could just keep pushing ahead, saying, no, this is how we've always done things, and keep exercising futility and bring something to this perfectly designed for a culture that no longer exists. And so we started asking the question, what would it look like? What if we could use our facilities as a church and we could model this, and this could be a rhythm for our individuals? What would it look like to take the 50, 70%, any average church, of our facilities that aren't used the majority of the week and flip those things around to engage the people that we are for in the natural rhythms of life? And if it doesn't engage the people we're for, what if it could support the people that we're for? And so this is what we introduced probably 6-7 years ago. It's called Nexus. Some of you don't even know about it, but we call it the Nexus Project. Nexus is simply a connection of two important things. It's the intersection. For us, the intersection of the two important things was the intersection of the community and the church. And we wanted to blur the lines of where the church leaves off, the community begins, and vice versa. And so we just started to try. We said, man, it was uncomfortable. It's so disruptive in so many ways, but we started a co-working space that would double as our student ministry space. It became the first co-working space in Matthews, Nexus Co-working Event Space. We created an event space. We created a preschool because we wanted to partner with families that were either in the third or fourth graduating class. I'm getting ready to do the graduation for them here in a couple of weeks. Waiting lists every time that they sign up again. We have a cafe that meets in our space, and then of course a church. And the goal of all of this, and this was, you just said, what can we do with the facilities we already have and the time and space that's already available? How can we use that to engage in the natural rhythms? How can we become a modern day Jacob's well? And the goal of this was not to have some cool new thing that we could brag about. The goal of this was incarnational. The goal of this was to connect with people in the natural rhythms of life in hopes they just get a taste of kingdom culture. We don't think drinking a coffee or dropping your kid off for preschool or working at a co-work is going to change your life, but maybe you just get a taste of a group of people with a kingdom ethos that are doing things a little different, that are loving you a little different, that are adding value to you in a little different way. And just maybe it'll be the entrance to a conversation where eventually we get to introduce people to the hope of Jesus and the reality of Jesus. That's where it's been. I want to show you a couple pictures of where it's going. So I haven't shown these pictures. This master plan was approved with Matthews back a long time ago. And so COVID hit. You guys remember that? That hit and changed the world. And so since 2020, I have not talked about this. But what you're looking at, this is the building you're sitting in currently. This is the co-working space next door and cafe, student ministry space. Every single thing in our facility has a dual usage. And so all of this is the master plan of what we want to add. And so we want to activate the front lawn. We want to have a pocket park, all these things. And again, what we're constantly asking are, what are the natural rhythms of people's lives? Who are the people we're for? And how can we create intersections in that? And so we're talking about more things. How do we build not bigger buildings, but how do we build a bigger and better well? That's our dream. We have zero interest in buildings. I have a lot of interest in building wells. And so this is a dream. Again, we're not actively in this project right now. We laid it down in 2020, but here's what I believe. We're on such a fast growth track right now. So much life change. So much is happening. I feel like there's a really good chance that this is going to be the conversation that we have to have when it comes into next year. And so this is where it's headed. There's a few more pictures that we'll show there as well. And I just want to kind of land the plane this way. There's so many things that you can take away from a passage of scripture like this. I want to give 3 kind of high-level takeaways, just reminders. One of them is simply this. And again, this sounds like church talk, but this is individual talk because the church is just people. And how we come together collectively forms our identity as a group of people. And so one of the things that's a takeaway is I want our posture. And I think our posture has to be for, not against. Even with people you don't like and you disagree with. And let me just say, sometimes you got to draw a line. Sometimes you have to take a stand. Sometimes you have to have a difficult conversation. I'm not saying that you don't. Jesus did that. But I'm telling you, his posture was always, what he came against was always in light of who he was for. So let me just ask you, the next time you want to grab the microphone for who you're against, just let me ask you, who are you for on the other side of it that's driving what you're against? Our posture has to be for, not against. The second thing is this, in light of who we're for, sometimes we have to take the uncommon path. I wonder what it'd be for you. Like when you think about your neighbors, coworkers, friends, family, like what's the uncommon path? What's the thing? Like maybe you've been trying the exact same approach, but maybe it's like, hey, less words and more love. Like, man, you've been trying to convince them with apologetics, but maybe you just need to serve them so well that one day they're like, these people have served me so well that they now have a voice in the conversation. What's the uncommon path? I don't know. The third thing is this. We have to meet people where they are. Jesus was so good at this. So much of what we do as a church, we want people to meet us on our terms. We got to figure out how to get in the rhythms of people's lives, not because we want something from them, we want something for them. To get in their lives and meet them where they are. Remember, Jesus didn't invite her to the temple or the synagogue. He met her at the well. So as we close, simple invitation. If you're here, if you're listening to this, listening to the podcast, and you're not a follower of Jesus, maybe you're not sure if you're a follower of Jesus. Maybe you say, hey, Chris, I think I used to be, and I'm not sure if I am because like stuff happened in your life. And you're trying to figure it out. Some of you are like, I've got questions. I'm not sure I want to be. If you're not a Jesus follower, I just want to say this. I hope you become one. Because look at the leader. Look at Jesus. He would do anything to come out of his rhythms, to look you in the eyes, and to add value to your life. To remind you that you are worth something. To remind you that you are not the sum total of what has happened to you, but you are bigger than that. The leader of this whole thing, Jesus, is worth it. And I'm just telling you, Jesus won't disappoint you. Even if some of us, as his followers, do, Jesus will not disappoint you, so I hope you'll become a follower of Jesus. And here's what I think. That thing that happened to this woman at the well when she encountered Jesus, where her life was changed, I believe that can, and I believe that will happen to you as well. If you would call yourself a believer, you say, hey, I believe in the resurrection. I believe in Jesus. I want to invite you to follow. Don't just stop at believing. It's great stories every Sunday. It's good, Pastor. What we're going to eat? Yeah. Like, follow. This is the invitation for my life, too. It's not just yours. When you bump into the way of Jesus and encounter your way, then what would it look like to follow his way, not just believing? The invitation of Jesus was not just to believe. That was the on-ramp. The invitation was to follow the ways of Jesus. Specifically, today as we end this series, talking about this, what would it look like to follow Jesus in the uncommon, sometimes uncomfortable path to love people who are nothing like us, to reach people who are nothing like us, to bless people who are nothing like us? What would it look like? This is the way of Jesus. Jesus would say, hey, this is just how we do things around here. I would say as a church, this is just how we do things around here. Let me just tell you, it gets messy. Last thing is this, as a church, I just want to invite us, and this is hard for me, I just want to invite us to loosen our grip on preferences. Like, isn't it true that we all have a way we like things being done? Like, we like certain songs, we like certain music, we like things to look a certain way. I do too, we all do. But if we could just loosen our grip on our methodology, loosen our grip on our preferences, because the last thing in the world we want to do is have a church that is perfectly designed for a culture that no longer exists. So here's my invitation. Let's build wells, not buildings. This is not interesting. But this can change communities. This can change families. That can change a city. So let's commit to building wells, and let's commit to embrace all that comes with that, because let me just tell you, it is very disruptive. So here's a snapshot. It's pretty remarkable what's happened. We have 250, 300 people a day that are on our campus from our community, not just our church as well. Again, I mentioned third or fourth, I can't remember, maybe fourth graduating class of 4 kids preschool that's investing in the lives of families, partnering with families, some of which had never been to our church. All of this is going on with Nexus. We created the first co-working space in Matthews. All of these things we've talked about. We're an employer. There's about 25 people that are employed on the corner. We've become a sustainable part of the local economy. We're doing so much good. In the first 3.5 years of this, Nexus, not the church, Nexus has contributed we're getting close to $90,000 back into local nonprofits that are doing good in our community. While we're creating a well, we're serving the marginalized. It's this beautiful thing. That's in addition to all the things that the church is doing and the partners that the church has. And then our church, guys, there's some remarkable things happening. We baptized 28 people already this year. We have a whole nother line of people that are just waiting. They're getting ready to baptize. God is on the move doing some incredible things. I think it's upward of 500 of the 4U bags now that we've given out to the homeless and houseless in our community. And these are just a few things, our partnerships with all these different organizations, so many things. And I'm just telling you, if you have been around this place and you've been giving to this place and you've been serving, you should feel proud. And if you're new to this place, I'm telling you, this is an incredible community, not because I lead it, but because of the heart of the people sitting in the seats next to you. But here's my last challenge. Don't just be proud. Be a part. I remember coming to an intersection in my life where I had so much hero worship from my dad. My dad's one of the most generous people I've ever been around. But I came to a point in my life where I had to realize, am I going to continue to be proud of my dad, or am I going to take part and let this become my life? I don't want you just to be proud. I want you to be a part. And so today I want to give you a quick opportunity as you leave. There's going to be multiple opportunities. So we've got some logos. Put these up here. These are all our ministry environments on a Sunday morning. Today is a free pass. We want you to be here. We want you to experience it. If you're a guest with us, we're glad you're here. Don't want anything from you. If you are ready to take a step, there's 2 ways that you can drive this thing, this vision, this stuff that we're about as a church. You can be generous, with your resources, and you can be generous with your time. And so for some of you, you've been thinking about serving with one of the teams. These are the teams that make all of our Sunday mornings happen. We have so many things that happen outside of Sundays. Today we're going to have tables outside. If you've been interested in a conversation, you don't have to sign up for anything. You can just walk by and say, hey, tell me a little bit more. I want to talk to someone. So there'll be representatives at all the tables. You can talk to them, learn what it's like, what the commitments are, all that kind of stuff. And again, if you're not ready today, whenever you're ready, they're still going to be there, and we are growing fast, and we need people in every single one of these areas. And so we'd love for you to take a step. Maybe you can just sign up and say, hey, I want to come shadow on one of the environments. Or maybe it's just like, hey, I just want to have a conversation. I'm not in yet. We would love to do that with you guys. And I just want to say again, greatest privilege of my life, aside from being a husband, getting to raise my kids, is being a part of this church and what God is doing. And it's so much bigger than me, the capacity and the potential. You guys, we have people from all over the country that are asking us what we're doing with this. So many of you didn't even know we were doing it, but you've been innovators. You've been willing to take the uncommon path. And I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope that we can model this not only as a church, but in our individual lives as well. Let me pray for us. God, take all of this. Do whatever you want with it. God, I just pray that for the individual this morning, that the thing that they needed to hear was that you're willing to look them eye level at the well, right where they are. That the shame, the thing that they feel that made them feel that you would never come into contact with them, that none of that's real. Maybe that's the thing that someone needs to walk away with today. God, for some of us, it just needs to be a resurgence and a reminder to hold loosely the things that you have placed in our hands. God, maybe for some of us, it's just reigniting a passion to introduce the people that we know and that we care about to your unfailing love. God, whatever it is, I pray that you would do it for your glory and for your kingdom. God, I pray that we would be carriers of the culture of your kingdom. And I pray that you would give us courage today, not just to believe in something, but to follow someone. We love you. In Jesus' precious, powerful, and matchless name we pray. Amen.
Thanks for joining us online this week. We will see you Sunday, January 5th for a brand new message at 9:30 or 11 a.m. Have a great week.